But today's topic is about project management offices and project management oversight in an organization. And basically a PMO, whenever I hear people say project management office or PMO, it has good and bad connotations with the term. The good connotations all include things like you introduce standards, you're establishing processes so people have clear expectations and know what their ownership and responsibility is all about. It gives people an ability to be measured objectively with how to attain certain success factors in the organization, things like standard templates so people are all doing things the same way or at least look like they're coming from the same company. Those are all the things that a PMO really should bring to the organization, and it should be viewed in a positive sense, not as a burden. But unfortunately, in some organizations, the PMO does add a lot of administration, so it turns into a bit of a negative when you're having to deal with a PMO. So the fact that you have to invest in additional resources potentially, both technology-wise and people-wise, which increases the cost of your bottom line. And can your company gain benefit enough return on investment for that cost? A lot of times the PMO is looked at or viewed at as really a paper machine, a paperwork shuffling machine. So everyone has to fill out the risk assessment, and then we have to do project reviews, and we get assessed and rated on the project reviews, and we have to go through gate controls. But there was a reason why those were put in place, and in some cases if a project's going smoothly, it does look like it's a lot of overhead for no benefit, but if a project's going poorly, you can immediately see the benefit for doing that administration. So there is a bit of a healthy balance with how much administration you should include with the PMO, but there is some. You can't really get away from it just to be able to make sure that you have some kind of baseline that people can adhere to. And of course, the other thing is the PMO, one thing I believe a PMO can help an organization do is keep on top of best practices, make sure that the team is supporting the way the organization wants projects to be run, and that you're on periodic basis doing some kind of internal reviews or checkpoints or statuses. But that tends to also mean you have to save data. You have to document status reports and save deliverables and categorize all your meeting notes, and then it becomes an information overload. How can you data mine all of that information and still have it be an effective way to learn lessons and pass knowledge on to people? So sometimes the PMO can look like it's very paperwork heavy, and too much information is being gathered for the benefit of others to be able to leverage that information. So there's good and bad with PMO, and really the thing that I think about with a PMO, having worked in many organizations and running a small company like TopStep, is that you have to define the PMO for your organization. There is no one-size-fits-all. So the key to the benefits of a PMO are really to define the PMO to be what you need it to be in the organization. So, for example, establish a charter, establish a definition of what your PMO is responsible for. Not only what it is responsible for, but what it is not responsible for. I remember early on in my career working to develop a PMO, and one thing that was very clearly stated in the PMO is this is not a customer-facing organization. It is internal only, and it's meant to keep us on track as a continual improvement on our methodology. So that draws a line on what the PMO should be doing and considering when it comes to defining the benefits and objectives. And defining those benefits and expected outcomes give people an understanding of what their role is, what their responsibilities are, and really what are things that have to be done to keep best practices going within the organization. So a definition is really important in the organization, but definitions are hard because a lot of times you're starting from scratch. So I thought I'd kind of throw out an example charter that I've seen used in the past when it comes to defining what a PMO is. And this sort of establishes the spirit of what a PMO is. So here's an example one. The project management office is responsible for establishing standard processes and templates, to be used for consistent and predictable project delivery, training project managers on defined methodologies, and monitoring project success for continual process improvement to increase project profitability, transparency to executive management, and customer satisfaction. So that is a very, very long sentence, and I try not to read my slides when I'm doing a presentation, but I had to actually read this one because I did not commit it to memory. But it does hit a number of clear objectives and something that can be measured, such as making sure project managers are trained and doing some kind of recurring refresher training. That's a measurable action. Providing standard templates to be used and making sure that those are actually used as part of a project review. That's a measurable objective. So a charter like this establishes the ownership of what the project management is focused on, and that also helps you drive more clear definition of what a PMO is and what a PMO is not in the grand scheme of things within the organization. Now, I look at PMOs, and like I said before, there is no one-size-fits-all. There's no standard PMO anymore. Project management in itself is something that can be flexible according to the way that you run a professional services organization or the way that you need people to drive project delivery. It could be a very formal PMP, lots of deliverables, gate controls, that kind of PMO, or it could be I just need someone to make sure that we know when we're starting the project and we know when we're finishing the project, and we know that the customer is happy and we're doing what we said we would according to the SOW. So there's a big range of what a PMO can cover and they're responsible for. And as I was looking at the definition of PMOs and how I've seen PMOs established in organizations, I sort of bucketed it into 4 different kinds or categories. And this is just my definition of where I see PMOs fitting and the kinds of PMOs that people can consider in an organization. So there's the basic PMO. We'll get into these in a little bit more detail. There's something I call a mixed PMO. There's a transparent PMO and a modern PMO. So let's just dive into each of these and talk about sort of what I mean by these terms in the grand scheme of things. The basic PMO is something that I tag as it's a no-frills PMO. There's no gate controls, there's no monitoring, there's no measurements, there's no charts to say what your customer success is. It really is meant to at least establish standards in the system. Every project manager should be sending out weekly status reports. Here's a template, do it. So it's very much a very simple project management office, but it does introduce consistency. That's its focus. Here's what you should be doing, and doing some education, of course, or mentoring of your PMs, but it establishes a sort of basic baseline of standards in the organization, standards and processes. It's very easy to point to a template repository and say, here's your kickoff presentation slide deck, here's your status report, here's your lessons learned meeting, here's your meeting minutes template, and maybe a business model deliverable or something. We have something similar within TopStep. So a basic PMO to me is really sort of the entry level of what a PMO represents. The trade-offs with a basic PMO, however, is just because you introduce standards, that does not mean you introduce accountability or you introduce compliance. It's sort of assumed or expected that people that are introduced to the basic PMO are in a self-management mode. They know enough about project management that they know what they need to do. The processes may be outlined at a high level to keep things in a consistent manner, but it's mostly focused on making sure the templates are used so that we look like we come from the same company. There's no measurable objectives. We're not making sure that people are actually doing status reports. We're not actually measuring to make sure that you're hitting the schedule that you had published or that you even published a schedule. So there is a lot of deficiencies with the basic PMO approach. But it is a starter PMO. You can think of it as a starter PMO, I guess, as well. It's a way to establish consistency in the organization. And you have to start with something like this even to get that consistency and that standard implemented in the organization. When you're a small company, like 1 or 2 people, you tend to do things the same way because you're a small company. But as you grow, it becomes more and more important to be able to establish those standards and to push those standards out to the organization. And the basic PMO sort of publishes it but doesn't do any kind of follow-through. On the upside, though, of a basic PMO is it's minimal overhead, right? You establish your standards, and then you educate people on where those standards are, how they should be following them, and you trust your employees to follow that standard process. You may have something even like a standard operating guide or a project manager user guide or something that explains the processes, and it's, again, a self-managed approach. Now, there's another type of PMO that I've seen where you actually have someone that is driving the PMO. So you have a PMO role in your organization. And this person is the person that's double-checking to make sure people are using the standard templates. They are filling out or completing the deliverables that you expect. That they are doing project reviews and making sure the project reviews are capturing project health and doing a measurable objective of the project success. And this person tends to be a non-billable resource or a manager or a lead or some type of overhead role. And that's an investment in the organization to have this person wear one hat and focus internally on the success of the organization. And I've seen companies be successful at this, and I've seen companies attempt to be successful with this. The reason I call this the mixed PMO is actually what ends up happening once you establish this PMO and you have that nice non-billable resource overhead person in place, and then you start getting busy as an organization. And suddenly now your PMO person becomes a billable person as well. So now they're wearing 2 hats. And that's why I call it the mixed PMO, because it's a PMO, but then you start having the person who drives the PMO become one of the people that is part of the PMO. So they become a project manager because obviously they're the ones monitoring to make sure you're following the processes. So therefore they should also be able to deliver the project. So you know what, we're short of headcount, I need to grab you. And I tend to see this start happening in organizations where there is a lot of pressure to meet revenue numbers or profitability or billable hours. And that resource that's sitting there making sure everyone's doing the right thing within the PMO, they're driving the PMO standards. You look at that resource, you're like, but they could do billable work, so why shouldn't I just make them do billable work? And then the other situation that starts happening is that you're growing so fast as a company, you can't hire fast enough. So you know what? Some of that excess project management work, can you just have the PMO person pick it up and run with it? Okay. Which is all well and good. I mean, people can wear multiple hats in an organization. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. But if you have this person driving a successful PMO and you start having them wear the 2 hats, you end up having longer-term impacts on the successful objectives of your PMO. If you were responsible for making sure everyone else was following the right path, but then you also had to follow that path, what becomes your priority? Your priority becomes your own projects because you want to make sure your projects are successful, and you may start cutting corners on what it is you're supposed to be monitoring with other people. So the PMO may become less effective. Obviously, it depends on how much billable work that person, that driver is doing, or how much they can empower individuals to do self-management. But self-management can only last for so long. Once people start realizing they're not being held accountable, they're not being double-checked and ensuring that they're compliant, some people will start lowering their guard a little bit and not being as compliant, which then means the PMO becomes less effective at the end of the day. If you have to share the wealth of your PMO as a billable resource, you tend to lighten up their non-billable load, and how do you do that? The PMO is meant to be a comprehensive, let's make sure we keep on top of all the projects. Maybe you define some criteria of what projects need to be reviewed on a regular basis, but in general you're keeping a pulse on all the projects. When you start lowering the amount of work available to the PMO, like lowering the non-billable work, you tend to focus on what gives you the biggest impact if you have that resource working on PMO-related activities. And those are the high-risk projects, the escalations, and you unfortunately may end up having more of those because you don't have somebody making sure that people are staying on the right track. So you end up, the PMO becomes more of a firefighting type organization, which is not as effective as just a PMO making sure people are doing things cleanly. And if you're not looking at or keeping an eye on all the projects, you could be missing opportunities or missing trends where you could have prevented an escalation from happening, right? So it's really a longer-term impact. So if you start off with a PMO, you've made the investment, you have a person leading it, and then you're like, okay, I'm really growing fast, I have to put that person on some billable work. That is a good short-term resolution, but it can't be the long-term because then you're basically sharing that key role with two hats, and that may cause problems later on in the effectiveness of the PMO. But the good news is with this type of PMO, you have to establish standards, you have to establish metrics, you have to have regular reviews and measures and audits in place. So you do have a full PMO basically built out, of course defined to your organization. But it may be you start off down the right path, which is great, and then every now and then you share that PMO lead with a billable project, and that is also fine. But if you continue to do that long term, the PMO will become less effective because it won't have that management push, that management focus on it. The third type of PMO, I kind of categorize this as more of a metrics type PMO. I call it the transparent PMO. Transparency was a term that was thrown around quite a bit when metrics were all the rage. And metrics are still a very big part of running an organization. But you'd always hear the term of, well, we want the organization to be less transparent or more transparent. And really it's being able to publish results that people can look at any time, right? So you drive accountability by the fact that you're publishing objective measures and results from the PMO. And that's what I call the transparent PMO. You're definitely publishing those measures and not just collecting data for data's sake. In the transparent PMO, you do have full standards, again, just like the mixed PMO. You do have regular project audits in place. And you're measuring compliance, you're measuring to make sure that people are following the processes, you're measuring that the profitability is being maintained. And the executive management then has access to all of this information potentially at the touch of their fingers because there is a location where this information is being published. This does mean that there is somebody on top of the PMO all the time. Somebody is measuring and making sure that this information is available, up-to-date, accurate. So it tends to drive the need for a full-time person or some full-time dedicated person. Very much so like the mixed PMO, but as I mentioned, the mixed PMO ends up stealing those resources away if they need to. The benefit of a transparent PMO is that you do focus more on measures, publishing measures, accountability, scoreboarding to some extent, and having somebody focus on that as their job in the organization. The main challenge for the transparent PMO, though, I find is because you are trying to do all these measures, you're trying to gather lots of information, and that also means a lot of assessments, a lot of audits. So trying to consume all the possible data that you want and to maintain that data and those metrics does become a challenge for a transparent PMO. So what you need to focus on is don't try to do everything. Focus on what's important for project success. Start there, and if you need to build on it, great. But a PMO does not necessarily have to focus on resource utilization. A PMO is project management oversight. So focus on what you need for project success. How do you need to make sure that people are maintaining their budgets and there's high customer satisfaction, that you're hitting the quality that you as an organization have a reputation to deliver and you're hitting those on time. And then how are you sharing that information when there's lessons learned that would benefit the whole organization? How are you getting that information out there, consuming it in a way that you can give people sort of items of interest, bulletins or something like that to publish the things that other people have learned so that other project managers don't have to learn it again the hard way, so to speak. So the transparent PMO is very much about information gathering, making information available to people, and then making sure that all of that data is up to date and accurate. Now, there are multiple ways that you can publish data. Automatically, everyone thinks of, well, let's just go to a website, run a report, check whatever, some kind of blog that's out there for the PMO. But also think about more interactive things like open forum calls, maybe brown bag lunches or lunch and learns, setting up some kind of annual or recurring project manager training where you can address the things that have happened over time and where can improvements be made within the organization by certain project managers, maybe the way that the methodology is delivered, taking advantage of things like technology in the future, or ways that some of the organizations out there like TSAA, PS Village, SPI Research, where they publish trends that are happening in the organization, how can you take advantage of that? So the transparent PMO in this way is not as transparent because you sort of want to engage with people and you want to make sure that that information is not only being consumed, but they're helping with the way that information is published at the end of the day. Now, I will say that many organizations have difficulty in achieving this level of a transparent PMO because it requires dedicated headcount to be non-billable almost. And that's hard to do in a professional services organization where the margins are typically driven by your people and the amount of billable hours and billable work that you can get out of the team that you have. So having someone focus and dedicate on a transparent PMO, you really have to show that it is contributing to the success not only of the project delivery and customer satisfaction, but also to the success of the bottom line and profitability in the project. So this is all about measures, all about metrics at the end of the day. And finally, the last one, and this one is sort of a mix of everything, the modern PMO. It's not so much that PMOs have changed over time. It's more of a how can a PMO itself become more efficient. So you don't need a software system or any kind of tools to do a PMO. All you need is like a piece of paper and a pen if you really, really want to go old school. But really you could set up Microsoft Word documents and Excel documents and PowerPoint, and that can be your PMO in publishing of information. But today with PSA systems, professional services automation systems, you have a lot of technology at your fingertips that can produce the information that you're trying to measure in a much more effective manner. Yes, we all know Excel. Yes, we all know how to do pivot tables and add stuff up and create beautiful charts by using the chart wizard inside of Microsoft Excel. But if you have a tool that already does half that work for you or all the work for you, then it's really a matter of you becoming more the monitor. And that's what I see the modern PMO as, is you're doing more automation with technology and less central administration. So you can have a person run a PMO leveraging software systems and always being able to spend more time looking on where can improvement be made. Where can we save on overhead costs? Where can we introduce new offerings? So that person can be something that is more of a driver of change in the organization, a driver of growth in the organization versus being sort of the whip-wielding soup Nazi that says you have to be able to get your stats report in. Where is it? It's supposed to be here at 5 o'clock. So the modern PMO is more of monitoring and looking for growth in the organization is the way that I view the PMO. You still need to make sure you have templates and standard processes, but the modern PMO leverages technology to help measure some of that information versus the manual administration. So with a modern PMO and that technology at your fingertips, you do have more of a holistic view of the project, not pieces, parts, and artifacts. Holistic view of the client, right? And this is where you can have multiple systems talking to each other and being able to pull that variety of information about the client. The 360 view is what it's referred to sometimes. So the modern PMO leverages technology much more to complement the metrics that are supposed to be measured and to help with the growth of the organization. So PMO, I still think PMOs are useful. The term is used quite often still in the in the organizations. I mean, there's Project Management Institute and PMP certification, and project management offices exist in many forms in organizations. But you really have to define what a PMO means in your organization to be successful. What is the objective of the PMO? Is it to make sure everyone does things the same way? Great. But if you're not going to hold anyone accountable, then you're telling people you want them to do this way, but you have to follow through and double check it. So identify the objectives, define your standards, and make sure you have something to measure adoption. The basic PMO gives you that 2 out of 3. The third is that measurement piece, and that's where you start getting into the transparent PMO, modern PMO activities. But a standard PMO doesn't exist anymore. I think it's very much has to be contoured to your organization, to what your resources need. You may have all PMPs on staff. Everyone knows how to do project management, so a basic PMO is just what you need, and that's it. But not every organization is that fortunate to have that level of project management knowledge. So really the training aspect of it and helping people stay accountable by going through reviews is something that's very useful, I find. And it's really an investment. It's an investment in standards. It's an investment in making sure that you're following best practices. And it'll show as you work with customers. It'll show the quality of the work that you deliver as you work with customers.